I'm Walter Green, 70 years old, sitting here with my coffee nice and hot, the steam curling upwards like a gentle invitation. The aroma fills the air, rich and dark roasted, a comforting presence in the stillness of the morning. The newspaper's right here, folded next to my cup, the crisp edges still sharp. Haven't started it yet. Can't bring myself to dive into the world's problems just yet, just enjoying the quiet, the precious, undisturbed quiet. This is my time now. Retirement. A word that used to feel so distant, so abstract, now a tangible reality settling around me like a warm blanket. Took me a while to get used to it, you know. After all those years working at Peterson and Sons, always something to do, somewhere to be. The phone ringing, the clatter of typewriters, later the hum of computers, a constant soundtrack to my life. Meetings, deadlines, presentations, a relentless cycle. I remember the weight of responsibility, the pressure, the constant feeling of being behind, of needing to catch up. Now it's just me. The silence used to feel oppressive, echoing with the absence of activity. But slowly, gradually, I began to appreciate it. I learned to savor it. And now I like it. I crave it. I made this routine for myself, a carefully constructed scaffolding around which my days now take shape. Small things, but important. Coffee in the morning, just the right amount of sugar. One lump, precisely. I used to take two back in the day, but the doctor suggested cutting back. Funny how those little habits stick with you. Sit by the window, east-facing, catches the morning sun just right. See those dust motes, dancing in the light like tiny ballerinas performing a silent ballet. Peaceful, hypnotic almost. It's like a little sanctuary I've built for myself, a refuge from the noise and chaos of the world outside. This spot right here. My chair, old and worn, the leather creaking softly when I shift my weight, molded to my shape like an old friend, my coffee, the quiet. After all that time, all those years at we'll get to that. Peterson and Sons, it's a long story. One I'm not quite ready to tell yet, it's still too close. I take a sip, good coffee, strong, just the way I like it. The mug's warm in my hands. A simple, off-white ceramic mug chipped at the rim from years of faithful service. They're still strong, my hands, steady. Years of work, you see. Drafting blueprints, signing contracts, shaking hands, so many hands over the years. But good work, honest work. I always took pride in that. Built a lot of things with these hands. Not just physical things, although there were plenty of those. Buildings, bridges, roads, I saw them rise from the ground up. Concrete and steel transformed into something tangible, something lasting. Built a company, too. Helped build it anyway, from the ground up. Alongside Mr. Peterson, a man I both admired and resented. But that's another part of the story. A complicated part. Another sip of coffee. Looking out the window. The glass is a little smudged, I should really clean it. Mrs. Henderson next door is out watering her roses. Pink ones. A vibrant, almost shocking pink against the green of her lawn. Always liked those roses. They remind me of someone. A memory flickers, a fleeting image of a woman in a pink dress, her laughter echoing in the summer air. I push it away. She waves. A small, hesitant wave. I wave back. A little more confidently, I think. Nice lady. Quiet. Keeps to herself, like me. We exchange a few pleasantries over the fence sometimes, talking about the weather, the garden. Small talk, but comforting in its own way. I set the mug down on the small coaster beside my chair, a faded image of a sailboat on a calm sea. The warmth lingers on my palms. I flex my fingers, feeling the familiar stiffness in the joints. Pick up the newspaper. The headlines scream of conflict and disaster, the usual litany of human folly. Still haven't opened it. Don't really feel like reading the news today. Just enjoying the peace. The quiet. It's a good feeling. Contentment, that's the word. Didn't think I'd find it, not after, you'll see. Not after everything that happened. I fold the paper back up. Neatly, everything in its place. That's how I like it. Always have. Order, precision. Learned that in the know. Not yet. Not ready to go there. That part of my life, it's still too raw, sun's getting a little higher now, warming the room, nice and cozy. The dust motes are still dancing, their silent ballet continuing undisturbed. I lean back in my chair. The familiar creak is a comforting sound. Close my eyes for a moment. Just breathe, in, out, peaceful. This is good. This is what I worked for all those years, this quiet, this peace, this emptiness. Little did I know, well, let's just enjoy the quiet for now, before the storm. Before the past comes crashing back into the present, before the silence is shattered. The banquet hall glittered. Chandeliers, big and sparkly, hung from the ceiling. The light bounced off the polished floor, making it shine like a frozen lake. People milled about, dressed in suits and fancy dresses. The room buzzed. Low conversations, clinking glasses, the scrape of chairs against the floor, a constant murmur of activity. I stood near the back by the wall. Didn't want to be in the thick of it, just wanted to observe, see the faces, hear the talk, soak it all in. It was Peterson and Sons' 60th anniversary, 60 years, hard to believe. Felt like just yesterday I was a young draftsman, fresh out of college, walking through those same doors for the first time. Nervous, excited, full of hope. Now here I was, retired, watching the company I helped build celebrate a milestone I never thought I'd see. Charles Miller stood at the podium, spotlight shining right on him. He looked different. Older, of course, but something else too, a kind of hardness, a confidence, maybe arrogance that hadn't been there before. He was CEO now. My former protege used to sit across from me, eager to learn, soaking up every word I said. Now he commanded the room, his voice booming, echoing off the high ceiling. He raised his glass. To Peterson and Sons, he declared. The room erupted in cheers. I clapped politely, my hands feeling a little stiff. He continued, his voice smooth and practiced. Tonight, we celebrate not just 6 decades of innovation and success, but also the people who made it all possible. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. The visionaries, the pioneers, the tireless workers who built this company from the ground up. He started naming names. Mr. Peterson, of course, the founder, gone now, but his legacy lived on. Then a few of the early employees, the ones who'd been there from the beginning. I recognized some of them, nodded a silent greeting. He went on, listing key figures, department heads, influential managers. Each name was met with applause, a ripple of recognition spreading through the room. I waited. My name had to be next. It had to be. I'd been there, alongside Mr. Peterson from day one. We pored over blueprints, argued over designs, sweated over contracts. We built that company brick by brick, contract by contract. My contribution, it was undeniable. It was everything. Charles kept talking. More names. More applause. The list went on and on and on. But my name wasn't mentioned. Not a whisper. Not a single acknowledgement. The smile froze on my face. My hand, still holding my glass, began to tremble slightly. The room, which had been so vibrant, so full of life just moments before, now felt cold, empty. The silence surrounding my name echoed louder than all the cheers and applause. It was a deliberate omission, a calculated erasure, a public humiliation. And in that moment, something inside me broke. My smile, it just froze. Stuck there on my face, this ridiculous, brittle thing, like a porcelain mask, carefully crafted and painted but about to shatter into 1,000 pieces. The applause, the clapping, the echoing congratulations, it was supposed to be for success, for the culmination of years of backbreaking work, for the achievement that was us, for Peterson and Sons, for the legacy we'd built brick by painstaking brick. For the countless late nights fueled by lukewarm coffee and the unwavering belief in something bigger than ourselves. But it felt wrong, sharp, like 1,000 tiny knives pricking at my skin, each prick a reminder of the hours, the days, the decades I'd poured into this. I could feel the blood draining from my face, leaving me cold and clammy beneath the stiff collar of my shirt. My ears started ringing. A high-pitched whine that seemed to block out the celebratory din. isolatin. Me in a bubble of disquiet. I took a deep breath, the air catching in my throat, tried to steady myself, to ground myself in the reality of the polished marble floor beneath my expensive shoes. Outwardly, I remained calm, my frozen smile a testament to years of practiced composure. Didn't want to make a scene. Not here. Not in front of the city's elite, gathered beneath the glittering chandeliers of the grand ballroom. Not now after we'd finally reached this pinnacle. But inside, my stomach twisted, a tight knot of something. Anger. Yes, a burning ember of anger slowly igniting into a raging inferno. Disbelief, certainly. I couldn't quite comprehend, couldn't quite process the blatant omission. Hurt. A deep, visceral wound that pulsed with each beat of my increasingly rapid heart. I couldn't quite name the complex cocktail of emotions swirling within me. It just churned, like a storm brewing in the pit of my gut, threatening to erupt and consume everything in its path. I remembered the early days, the struggles, the shared triumphs with my father, the late nights strategizing, the quiet satisfaction of watching our vision take shape. And now, this. The room started to spin. Slowly at first, a gentle swaying that mirrored the nausea rising in my throat, then faster and faster, the elegant decor becoming a blur of gold and crystal. The lights, the faces, smiling, oblivious faces, the glittering chandeliers, all blurred together in a dizzying kaleidoscope of betrayal. I felt a wave of betrayal wash over me. A cold, sickening wave that threatened to pull me under, to drown me in the realization that everything I had believed in, everything I had worked for, had been diminished. Charles, my protege, he'd been like a son to me, eager to learn, soaking up every ounce of wisdom I offered. He looked right at me. I know he did. Our eyes had met across the room, his momentarily hesitant before he continued. And he deliberately skipped my name, erased me, as if I'd never been there. As if I hadn't poured my heart and soul, my blood, sweat, and tears into that company. As if I hadn't mentored him, guided him, shaped him into the man he was today. As if I hadn't built the very foundation upon which he now stood, basking in the unearned spotlight. I swallowed hard, my throat dry and constricted, tried to clear the lump that had formed in my throat. It felt like a rock, heavy and unyielding, a physical manifestation of the injustice I felt. The silence surrounding my name, it echoed in my ears, louder than Charles's smooth, practiced voice, louder than the thunderous applause, louder than the clinking glasses and the murmur of self-congratulatory conversations. A deafening silence, a silence that spoke volumes, a silence that screamed of injustice, of betrayal, of erasure, of being rendered invisible, a ghost in my own life. I closed my eyes for a moment, my eyelids fluttering against the sudden sting of unshed tears. Just a brief respite from the swirling room and the piercing silence, a desperate attempt to reclaim some semblance of control. Took another deep breath, the air tasting metallic and thin. Tried to regain my composure, to smooth the mask back onto my face, to hide the turmoil raging within. But the knot in my stomach remained, tightening, twisting. A constant, gnawing reminder of what I'd lost, of the recognition I deserved, of the respect I had earned, of what I'd never had, the acknowledgement, the gratitude, the simple courtesy of a mention. I didn't know. I just knew that something fundamental had shifted. The ground beneath my feet had cracked, the foundations of my world shaken, and it would never be the same again. Never. The sting, that sharp, unexpected jab of nothingness where my name should have been, it opened something inside me, like a floodgate. Memories, so many memories came rushing back. Not just a trickle, but a torrent, a deluge of images and sounds and feelings, overwhelming me in the midst of all that glitter and noise. I saw myself, younger, thinner, hair darker, hunched over a drafting table in a cramped office. The light was harsh, a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, casting long shadows across the room. The air was thick with the smell of ink and paper and stale coffee. I was poring over blueprints, meticulously checking every line, rhyme measurement, every detail. My brow furrowed in concentration, my hand moving with a practiced precision. Late at night, always late at night. Mr. Peterson would be there too, sometimes pacing back and forth, muttering to himself, his mind racing with ideas. We'd argue, debate, challenge each other, pushing each other to find the best solutions, the most innovative designs. We were a team, partners, building something special. I remember the first big contract, the thrill of it. The weight of the paper in my hands, the ink still slightly wet. My name, right there next to Mr. Peterson's. A symbol of our shared vision, our shared commitment. We celebrated that night, just the two of us, with cheap champagne and greasy takeout. It felt momentous, like we were on the verge of something big. Then came the struggles, the lean years, the times when we weren't sure if we'd make payroll, when we had to cut corners, make sacrifices. I remember skipping vacations, working weekends, missing birthdays and anniversaries, all for the company, all for the dream. We poured everything we had into it, our time, our energy, our lives. I saw myself in meetings, presenting our ideas, fighting for funding, defending our designs. The pressure was immense. The stakes were high, but we persevered. We believed in what we were doing. We believed in each other. And slowly, gradually, we started to see results. The contracts started coming in. The company started to grow. We hired more people, expanded our operations, moved into bigger offices. It was exhilarating. We were building something real, something tangible, something that would last. And now, standing here in this glittering banquet hall, listening to Charles Miller, my former protege, the man I had mentored and guided, the man who owed his entire career to me, he was telling the story of Peterson and Sons. Our story, but he was telling it wrong. He was leaving me out, erasing me from the narrative, making it seem as if I had never been there. As if I hadn't played a crucial role in every single success, every single innovation, every single triumph. The contrast was stark. The vibrant, dynamic past, full of struggle and triumph, of shared dreams and hard-won victories, and the hollow, empty present where my contributions were ignored, my sacrifices forgotten, my very existence denied. The wound, that sharp, stinging pain in my chest, deepened. It spread, a cold ache that radiated outwards, engulfing me in a wave of what? Disappointment, resentment, anger, I didn't know. It was a complex, tangled mess of emotions, too difficult to unravel in the midst of the celebratory din. I just knew that it hurt, deeply, and that something fundamental had been broken. The carefully constructed edifice of my life, built on a foundation of hard work and dedication and unwavering belief, had developed a crack, a deep, jagged fissure that threatened to bring the whole thing crashing down. The shock started to wear off, like a numbing agent slowly losing its effect. The swirling in my head subsided, the room stopped spinning, the nausea retreated, but the knot in my stomach that remained. It tightened, hardened, transformed into something else. Not just hurt, not just disappointment, something harder, colder, anger. A slow, simmering anger began to rise within me. Like a pot of water on the stove, gradually heating up, the bubbles starting to form, the surface beginning to tremble. It wasn't a hot, explosive anger. It was something quieter, more controlled, more dangerous. I took another sip of the lukewarm champagne. It tasted flat, lifeless, like everything else in the room. I looked at Charles, still holding court at the podium, basking in the spotlight, oblivious to the turmoil he had unleashed within me. His voice, once a source of inspiration, now grated on my nerves. His words, once full of promise, now sounded hollow, empty, meaningless. I thought about Mr. Peterson, my partner, my friend, gone now these past 10 years. He wouldn't have stood for this. He would have raised hell. He would have marched right up to that podium and set the record straight. He would have roared his disapproval, his voice booming, echoing through the room, demanding recognition, demanding respect. I closed my eyes for a moment, picturing him, his gruff voice, his firm handshake, his unwavering belief in us, in what we were building together. I remembered the first contract. I could almost feel the weight of the paper in my hands, the crisp new paper, the smell of the ink. My name printed right there beside Mr. Peterson's. Walter Green, clear, unambiguous, indelible, a testament to our partnership, to our shared vision, to our legacy. And now Charles was trying to erase that legacy, trying to rewrite history, trying to pretend that I had never been there, that I hadn't played a part, that I hadn't mattered. The anger intensified. The simmering pot began to boil. The bubbles rose to the surface, breaking, releasing a steady stream of resolve, a cold, hard resolve. I wouldn't let him do it. I wouldn't let him erase me. I wouldn't let him rewrite history. This wasn't about pride, not anymore. This was about truth, about justice, about reclaiming what was rightfully mine, my place in the story, my place in history. I opened my eyes. The room was still spinning slightly, but the dizziness had subsided. The nausea was gone. The knot in my stomach had transformed. It was still there, but it was different now. Harder, tighter, a ball of determination. I took a deep breath, the air filling my lungs, steady and strong. I straightened my shoulders, feeling the stiffness in my back, the years of work, the weight of everything. I looked at Charles, still talking, still smiling, still oblivious. And I made a decision. A quiet decision. A firm decision. A final decision. I would not be silenced. I would not be erased. I would set the record straight. I would reclaim my place. I would have my revenge. I paced, back and forth, back and forth. My study, usually a haven of peace, felt like a cage. The Persian rug, a gift from Martha years ago, muffled the sound of my footsteps, but it couldn't contain the turmoil inside me. On my desk, the founding documents lay spread out. Yellowed parchment, brittle with age, the ink faded but still legible. My name, Walter Green, right there beside Mr. Peterson's. Proof, irrefutable proof of my contribution, of my legacy. I stopped, stared at the documents, ran my hand over the rough surface of the paper, felt the weight of history in my fingertips. 60 years. 60 years of work, of dedication, of sacrifice. And now it was all being erased, swept under the rug, as if it had never happened. I started pacing again. Faster this time. The quiet of the room, usually so comforting, now amplified the turmoil inside me. My mind raced. What should I do? What could I do? I thought about the consequences, the disruption to my peaceful retirement, the legal battles, the public scrutiny, the media circus. It would be messy, ugly, exhausting. Martha's voice echoed in my ears. "Dad," she'd said, her voice laced with concern, "just let it go. It's not worth it. Enjoy your retirement. Don't let this bitterness consume you." She was right, of course. It wasn't worth it, not logically, not rationally. But how could I just let it go? How could I just stand by and watch my legacy be erased? How could I allow Charles Miller, my former protege, the man I had mentored and guided, to rewrite history? I stopped pacing, stood by the window, looked out at the garden. Martha had planted those roses, pink ones, her mother's favorite. They were beautiful, a symbol of life, of growth, of moving on, but I couldn't move on, not yet. Not until I had set the record straight, not until I had reclaimed my place. I turned back to the desk, looked at the documents again. My name, Walter Green, it was there, in black and white, indelible, unmistakable proof. I thought about Charles, his smug smile, his confident voice, his arrogance. He thought he could get away with it. He thought he could erase me. He thought he was better than me. He was wrong. I took a deep breath. The air filled my lungs, steady and strong. I felt a surge of something, not anger, not exactly, something colder, harder, resolve. I sat down at the desk, picked up a pen. My hand, usually so steady, trembled slightly. I hesitated for a moment, just a moment. Then I started to write a letter to Charles, a short letter, simple, dire, to the point, telling him that I knew, that I had proof, that I wouldn't be silenced. I folded the letter, put it in an envelope, addressed it, sealed it, stared at it for a long moment. Then I put it in my pocket. I stood up, walked to the window again, looked out at the garden. The roses were in full bloom, vibrant, alive, beautiful. I took another deep breath. The air felt lighter, cleaner. The turmoil inside me had subsided, replaced by a sense of peace. Not the quiet, gentle peace of my retirement, but something different, something stronger, the peace of knowing, of having made a decision, of having taken control. The decision was made. I would fight. I would reclaim my legacy. I would have my revenge. I sat at my desk, the same desk I'd used for years at Peterson and Sons, solid oak, heavy, reliable like me. Now it sat in my study, a silent witness to my retirement, and now to something else. The room was quiet, too quiet almost. Usually I enjoyed the quiet. It was a balm after the noise and chaos of the office, but now it was different. The silence felt heavy, charged, like the air before a storm. I reached out and touched the letter in my pocket. The crisp paper crinkled beneath my fingers, a small, silent confirmation of the decision I had made, a decision that would change everything. I thought about Martha, her worried face, her pleas for caution. "Let it go, Dad," she'd said. "It's not worth it." But it was worth it. It had to be. This wasn't just about me. This was about principle, about justice, about making sure the truth was known. I leaned back in my chair. The familiar creak of the leather was a comforting sound. I closed my eyes for a moment, just breathed, in, out, slow, steady. The weight of my decision settled upon me, heavy, but not unpleasant. It was a familiar weight. The weight of responsibility, the weight of purpose. I'd carried that weight for years, at Peterson and Sons, building the company, making decisions, taking risks. Retirement was supposed to be a time of lightness, of freedom from responsibility, of peace. But peace wasn't enough anymore. Not after what Charles had done. Not after he tried to erase me, to steal my legacy. I opened my eyes. The quiet of the room, it didn't feel oppressive anymore. It felt empowering, amplifying. It gave me space to think, to plan, to strategize. I thought about Charles, his arrogance, his smugness, his betrayal. He thought he could get away with it. He thought he was untouchable. He was wrong. A grim satisfaction settled over me. A quiet, cold satisfaction. I had the power, the knowledge, the leverage. I could bring him down. I looked around my study. The bookshelves lined with volumes I'd collected over the years. The photographs on the wall capturing moments from my life, my family, my friends, my past. This was my final project, my last act, my masterpiece. I wouldn't just retire quietly. I wouldn't just fade away. I would make sure I was remembered. I would make sure that Charles Miller paid for what he had done. I sat up straight, my back still stiff but my resolve unwavering. I reached out and touched the letter in my pocket again. A small smile played on my lips. The game was on. I started going out more. Not my usual routine, mind you. I'm a creature of habit. My coffee, my paper, my quiet mornings. But this was different. This was reconnaissance. Charles, I needed to understand him, really understand him. Not the eager young man I'd mentored, but the CEO he had become. The man who had erased me. So I started showing up at industry events, conferences, luncheons, even the occasional cocktail party. Places I'd normally avoid like the plague. Too much noise, too many people, too much fuss. But I forced myself to go. I needed to see him, to observe him, to study him. He was always the center of attention, holding court, smiling, shaking hands. The consummate CEO, charismatic, confident, in control. He'd cultivated this image, carefully, meticulously, the perfect corporate leader. I watched him from a distance, sipping my club soda, trying to blend in. Trying to be invisible, just another face in the crowd, an old retiree, Harmels. As unremarkable, I listened to his speeches, smooth, polished, full of buzzwords and platitudes, vision, innovation, synergy, leadership. He spoke with such certainty, such conviction, as if he actually believed the words he was saying. I watched him interact with his colleagues, the deference, the respect, the fear. Yes, there was definitely fear there, beneath the surface. Hidden behind the forced smiles and the polite laughter, he was powerful, no doubt about it. He built an empire, a carefully constructed empire of lies, but there were cracks, subtle cracks, beneath the facade, moments of hesitation, of uncertainty, of insecurity. I saw it in his eyes, a flicker of doubt. When he was challenged, when he was questioned, when he was pushed, I saw it in his hands, a slight tremor when he was under pressure. When he was losing control, I saw it in his smile, a tightness, a rigidity when he was pretending. He wasn't as confident as he appeared, not as secure, not as invincible. I watched him, I listened to him, I studied him, and I learned. I learned his weaknesses, his vulnerabilities, his secrets. I was searching for a lever, a pressure point, a weak spot, something I could use, something I could exploit, and I found it. I found several, in fact. Small things, seemingly insignificant details, but they were there, hidden in plain sight, waiting to be discovered. I continued my reconnaissance, gathering information, piece by piece, like a detective building a case. Slowly, methodically, patiently, I was learning, I was adapting, I was evolving. The quiet retiree, the harmless old man, he was gone, replaced by something else, something sharper, more focused, more dangerous. I had a plan that was taking shape, a plan that would expose Charles for who he really was, a plan that would bring him down. The game was just beginning. The attic was dusty. Sunbeams slicing through the grimy window panes illuminated floating motes of dust, dancing like tiny ghosts in the stillness. I coughed, waving a hand in front of my face. The air smelled old, a mixture of dust and mildew and memories. I hadn't been up here in years, not since Martha moved out. This was where we stored, well, everything. Old furniture, holiday decorations, boxes filled with who knows what, and my files, years and years of them, stacked in neat, labeled boxes. My life's work. I pulled down the cord, switching on the bare bulb hanging from the rafters. The light flickered, then steadied, casting long, distorted shadows across the cluttered space. I found the boxes I was looking for. Peterson & Sons early years. Peterson & Sons expansion. Peterson & Sons my projects. My labels, meticulous, precise, just like everything I did. I carried the boxes downstairs one by one, my back protesting with each trip, set them on the dining room table. Martha wouldn't be happy. She always kept the table spotless, but she wasn't here. And this was more important. I opened the first box. The smell of old paper filled the air. I reached in and pulled out a file. The Hampton Bridge Project. One of my earliest designs. I flipped through the pages. Blueprints, specifications, contracts, my handwriting neat, precise, familiar. I remembered the long hours I'd spent on that project, the challenges, the setbacks, the triumphs. I'd poured my heart and soul into it, and it had worked. The bridge was still standing, a testament to my skill, to my dedication, to my vision. I spent hours going through the files, one by one, project after project, year after year, reliving the triumphs, re-examining the challenges, refamiliarizing myself with the intricacies of the business I had helped build, the Crawford Building, the Wilson Dam, the Peterson Tower, each project a story, a chapter in the history of Peterson & Sons, and my name was on every single one. This wasn't just research. It was a ritual, a reconnection, a reaffirmation. I was dusting off the tools of my trade, sharpening my mind, honing my skills, preparing myself for what lay ahead. I remembered the late nights, the endless meetings, the difficult decisions, the sacrifices. I'd given so much to that company. My time, my energy, my life. And Charles had tried to erase it all, to pretend that I had never been there, that I hadn't played a part, that I hadn't mattered. He was wrong. I mattered. I had mattered. And I would matter again. I closed the last box. My hands were covered in dust, my back ached. But my mind was clear, sharper than it had been in years. I knew the business, inside and out. I knew the history, I knew the secrets. And I knew exactly what I needed to do. This wasn't just about reclaiming my legacy. This was about setting the record straight, about exposing the truth, about justice. I stood up, stretched, felt the stiffness in my joints, but I also felt a surge of energy, a renewed sense of purpose. The tools were dusted off, sharpened, ready to be used. The game was about to begin. I sat at the dining room table surrounded by stacks of files. Years of work spread out before me like a battlefield. My battlefield, the Hampton Bridge, the Wilson Dam, the Peterson Tower. Projects I'd poured my heart and soul into, projects I'd saved. I'd always been good at problem solving, seeing the big picture, finding solutions where others saw only obstacles. Mr. Peterson used to say I had a knack for it, a gift. And those projects, they'd all had problems, cost overruns, design flaws, contractor disputes, things that could have derailed them, ruined them, but I'd fixed them, one by one. Worked late nights, weekends, holidays, whatever it took. I'd untangled the messes, streamlined the processes, brought them back on track, under budget, ahead of schedule. And now looking through these files, something clicked. Something I hadn't seen before, something hidden. The numbers, they didn't quite add up. Small discrepancies here and there, nothing major. Nothing that would have raised any red flags at the time. But now, with the benefit of hindsight, with the knowledge of Charles's ambition, it all started to make sense. He'd been skimming, siphoning off funds, subtly, cleverly, concealing it within the very projects I had salvaged. He'd used my successes to cover his crimes. I felt a surge of anger, but it was a cold anger, a controlled anger, an anger that focused my mind, sharpened my senses. This was it, the lever, the pressure point, the weak spot. The founding documents, proof of my contribution, proof of my rightful place, and Charles's embezzlement, proof of his betrayal, proof of his corruption. The two together, a devastating combination, an irrefutable indictment. I sat back in my chair, the weight of the files pressing against my chest, but the weight, it didn't feel oppressive anymore. It felt empowering. The pieces were clicking into place. A plan was forming, a plan that was elegant, precise, devastatingly effective. I would leak the founding documents, along with the evidence of Charles's embezzlement, to the right person, someone who would understand, someone who would act. The truth would come out. Charles's carefully constructed image would shatter, his credibility destroyed, his career ruined. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath. The air filled my lungs, steady, strong. I had a plan, and I would see it through. This wasn't just about reclaiming my legacy. This was about justice, about accountability, about making sure that Charles Miller paid for what he had done. A small smile played on my lips. The game was truly on. I sat at my desk staring at the phone, a rotary phone. Old-fashioned, I know, but I liked the solid feel of it, the satisfying click of the dial, the weight of the receiver in my hand. It felt real, tangible. Not like those flimsy cell phones everyone carries around these days. I picked up the receiver. The dial tone buzzed in my ear, a familiar sound, comforting almost. I hesitated, just for a moment. This was it, the first move. No turning back now. I dialed the number. Slowly, methodically, each click of the dial a small, irreversible step. The number was etched in my memory. Sarah Jenkins, investigative journalist, local paper, The Chronicle. She had a reputation for integrity, for tenacity, for getting to the truth. I'd met her once years ago, at a ID event. We'd talked briefly about the city, about the changing times, about the importance of honesty. She struck me as sharp, perceptive. Someone who saw things that others missed. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. I held my breath. What would I say? How would I begin? Hello. Her voice crisp, clear, professional. Ms. Jenkins, I said, my voice lower than usual, a little rough, speaking. My name is A Friend. I hesitated. Couldn't use my real name, not yet. A friend of the truth. A pause, a slight hesitation on the other end of the line. I'm intrigued, she said. What can I do for you, friend? I took a deep breath. I have some information. I paused again, choosing my words carefully. Information about Peterson and Sons. Another pause, longer this time. Peterson and Sons, she said, her voice sharper now, more alert. What kind of information? Information about certain irregularities. I kept it vague, just a teaser, a breadcrumb. Irregularities, she sounded interested. Can you be more specific? Let's just say, not all the numbers add up. I let the words hang in the air. Silence, a long silence. Then I see, she said, her voice low, thoughtful. And why are you telling me this? Because I believe the truth needs to be known. Another silence. Then I understand, she said. Can you provide me with any evidence? Not yet, I said, but I can give you a starting point. I'm listening. I gave her a name, a project name, a date, a seemingly insignificant detail. But it was enough, a thread, a loose thread that she could pull, unravel, expose. I'll look into it, she said, her voice quiet, almost reverent. Thank you, I said, and hung up. I sat there for a moment, the phone still warm in my hand, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. The silence of the room, it felt different now. Lighter, brighter. The first piece was in motion. The game had truly begun. I ran into Mrs. Henderson again, watering her roses. Same pink ones. Beautiful. Morning, Walter, she said, her voice bright and cheerful. Lovely day, isn't it? Yes, it is, I replied, smiling. A genuine smile this time. Not the strained, brittle thing I'd worn at the banquet. Those roses are looking particularly vibrant today, Martha. Oh, she chuckled. Always so complimentary. They're just ordinary roses, Walter. Ordinary, perhaps, I said, my smile widening. But they bring a bit of cheer to the neighborhood, just like you, Martha. She blushed. Oh, you stop it, she said, playfully swatting my arm with her gardening glove. We chatted for a few minutes more, about the weather, about the local garden club, small talk, pleasantries, the kind of conversations I'd normally find tedious. But today they were useful, a way to maintain my cover. Later that week, I went to the weekly Rotary Club luncheon. Same group of old-timers, same tired jokes, same lukewarm coffee. I sat at my usual table, nodding greetings to the familiar faces. Walter, how are you doing? Dr. Evans asked, his voice booming across the table. Oh, I replied, chuckling softly. Same old, enjoying my retirement. Here you were at the Peterson and Sons anniversary gala, he said, his eyes twinkling. Quite the affair, wasn't it? It was something, I said, my voice trailing off. I feigned a slight cough. Can't quite recall all the details, to be honest. Getting old, I tapped my temple with a finger, a little performance of forgetfulness. Oh, you're not that old, Walter, he said, laughing. Just a bit selective in your memory, perhaps. He winked. I chuckled along with him. Perhaps you're right, I said. Say, did they happen to mention anything about the early days? The founding of the company? Can't say I recall, he said, shaking his head. Too much champagne, I'm afraid. My memory's not what it used to be either. Ah, well, I said, waving a dismissive hand. It's not important. Ancient history. I continued to play the part. The harmless retiree, the slightly forgetful old man, content with his quiet life, uninterested in the machinations of the business world. I ran into Charles a few times. At the golf club, at the grocery store, brief encounters, cordial greetings, nothing more. Walter, good to see you, he'd say, his smile wide and false. Charles, I'd reply, my voice calm and neutral. How's business? Booming, he'd declare, his voice full of forced enthusiasm. Couldn't be better. Glad to hear it, I'd say, my smile thin. Non-committal, I'd ask him about his family, about his golf game, about anything but the company, keeping it light. keeping it superficial. He seemed relaxed, at ease. He thought I'd forgot, that I'd moved on. He was wrong. I was watching him, studying him, waiting, biding my time, letting him lull himself into a false sense of security. The mask of innocence. It was a useful tool. It allowed me to move unseen, unheard, undetected. The game was proceeding exactly as planned. I spread the documents out on my desk. The founding papers of Peterson and Sons. Yellowed with age, the ink faded but still legible. My name, Walter Green, right there beside Mr. Peterson's. Proof, irrefutable proof. I picked up a red pen, felt the smooth plastic against my fingers, started to annotate, carefully, meticulously, highlighting key passages, adding notes in the margins, explaining my contributions, my role in the company's early success. Initial design concept WG, negotiated first major contract WG. Secured funding for expansion WG, small notes, but important notes. Notes that told the real story. I worked for hours, stopped only for a cup of coffee and a sandwich. Martha had left a plate covered in plastic wrap on the counter. Roast beef, my favorite. She still looked after me, even though she didn't agree with what I was doing. I finished annotating the founding documents, put them in a neat pile. Then I moved on to the evidence of Charles's embezzlement. I'd printed out the financial records, page after page of numbers, dry, boring, but damning. I'd spent days analyzing those records, tracing the money, following the paper trail, unraveling Charles's carefully constructed web of deceit. It was tedious work, but necessary. I highlighted the discrepancies, circled the suspicious transactions, added notes explaining how the money had been siphoned off, how Charles had used my projects, my successes, to cover his tracks. I made sure everything was clear, concise, easy to understand. I didn't want there to be any confusion, any room for doubt. I organized the evidence, put it in a separate pile. Then I put everything together. The founding documents, the financial records, my notes, my annotations, the complete package. I put it all in a large manila envelope, sealed it, addressed it to Sarah Jenkins. The Chronicle. I hesitated for a moment. Then I added a small note, a handwritten note. The truth will out. I looked at the envelope, sitting there on my desk, a plain brown envelope, but it contained everything, my legacy. Charles's downfall, the truth. I picked it up, felt the weight of it in my hand, the weight of justice, of accountability, of history. I knew what I had to do. I knew it was the right thing to do. I took the envelope to the post office, mailed it, watched as the clerk stamped it, canceled the stamp, tossed it into the bin. It was done. The stage was set. The bait was cast. Now all I had to do was wait. I walked out of the post office. The sun was shining. Birds were chirping. A normal day, except it was, not for me, not anymore. I'd mailed the package, the big manila envelope containing everything. The founding documents, the evidence of Charles's embezzlement, my annotations, my notes, the truth. It was in Sarah Jenkins' hands now, the journalist, the one I'd called, the one I'd given that little nudge, that little breadcrumb. I knew she wouldn't ignore it. The information was too explosive, too damning. It was out of my hands now. The trap was set. The bait was cast. All I could do was wait. I walked home slowly, taking my time, enjoying the normality of it all, the sunshine, the birdsong, the quiet streets, knowing that soon everything would change. I stopped at the corner store, bought a newspaper, my usual routine, but today it felt different, like I was watching a play that I'd written and directed, but I wasn't in control of the ending. I walked the rest of the way home, opened the front door, stepped inside. The silence of the house, it felt different now. Not the peaceful, comforting silence I'd grown accustomed to, but a charged silence, an expectant silence, the silence before the storm. I put the newspaper on the table, didn't even bother to open it, couldn't concentrate. My mind was racing, thinking about what would happen next. I made a cup of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, stared out the window. Mrs. Henderson was tending her roses, the pink ones. They looked vibrant, almost defiant. I took a sip of coffee. It tasted bitter, like ashes. I thought about Charles. What would he do? How would he react? I thought about the company, Peterson and Sons, the company I'd helped build, the company I'd saved. What would happen to it? I thought about my legacy, my contribution, the truth. Would it finally be recognized? I didn't know. I couldn't know. It was all out of my hands now. I finished my coffee, rinsed the cup, put it in the sink, everything in its place. My usual routine, but it felt meaningless, empty. I went into my study, sat at my desk, stared at the blank wall. My mind a whirlwind of thoughts, of possibilities, of consequences. The waiting, it was the hardest part. The not knowing, the uncertainty. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath. Tried to calm myself, to center myself. The bait was cast, the trap was set. Now all I could do was wait and see what happened next. I picked up the newspaper, the Chronicle, my usual routine. But today was different. My hand trembled slightly as I unfolded the paper. There it was, on the front page above the fold, a bold headline. Peterson and Sons CEO accused of embezzlement. I stared at the headline. My heart pounded in my chest. I couldn't quite believe it. It was real. It was happening. I scanned the article. Sarah Jenkins, her byline. She'd done it. She'd exposed him, Charles, my protege, the man I'd trusted. The article detailed everything. Charles's embezzlement, his carefully concealed scheme, the money he'd siphoned off, the projects he'd used to cover his tracks, my projects, and it mentioned me, Walter Green, the forgotten founder, the unsung hero, the man who'd saved the company, time and time again, my contributions, my sacrifices, my legacy. It was all there in black and white for everyone to see. I read the article again, slowly, carefully, absorbing every word, every detail. The phone rang. I jumped, startled. I hadn't expected anyone to call, not so soon. I picked up the receiver. Hello. Walter, Martha's voice, sharp, worried. Have you seen the paper? Yes, I said, my voice calm, steady. Dad, what have you done? I did what I had to do. A long silence. Then, he's ruined Dad, his career, his reputation, everything. He did it to himself, Martha. But why? Why did you have to do this? Because it was the right thing to do. Another silence. Then, I don't understand, Dad. I know, I said, but you will. I hung up, sat there for a moment, the phone still warm in my hand. The silence of the house, it felt different now. Not the charged, expectant silence of before, but a quieter silence, a heavier silence. The news spread like wildfire. The local TV stations picked up the story. Then the national networks, the internet, social media. It was everywhere. Charles, his face, his name, plastered all over the news, accused, condemned. His carefully constructed image is shattered. I saw him on TV giving a press conference, denying everything, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, a miscalculation. He looked haggard, pale, his smile gone. I watched him, listened to his words, his voice weak, uncertain. He wasn't the confident, charismatic CEO anymore. He was a broken man. He tried to deflect, to blame others, to rewrite the narrative, but it was too late. The truth was out, and it was undeniable. I saw the initial dismissal in his eyes, the flicker of annoyance at what he likely perceived as a minor inconvenience, a bump in the road of his otherwise flawless trajectory. Then, as the questions grew sharper, more pointed, more insistent, I saw the shift. The bravado began to crumble, replaced by a dawning realization of the gravity of the situation. His carefully crafted responses, once delivered with such practiced ease, now sounded halting, unconvincing. He stumbled over his words, his eyes darting nervously around the room, searching for an escape route that wasn't there. The carefully constructed narrative of his success, the one that had excluded me, erased me, rendered me invisible, it was crumbling, piece by piece, like a house of cards in a strong wind. And I sat there, watching it all unfold, feeling nothing, Not joy, not triumph, not even satisfaction, just emptiness. The trap had closed. The press conference was a disaster. Charles looked like a deer caught in headlights. Sweating, stammering, his eyes darting everywhere but at the cameras. He kept repeating the same tired phrases. Misunderstanding, miscalculation, taken out of context. Nobody believed him, not anymore. Sarah Jenkins' article had been thorough, detailed, devastating. She laid out the evidence clear and concise, leaving no room for doubt. I watched it all on TV, from the comfort of my own living room, a cup of coffee in my hand. The newspaper folded neatly beside me. A strange sense of detachment washed over me. It wasn't the thrill of victory I'd expected. It was more like watching a play I'd written, directed. But I wasn't part of the performance. I was just an observer. The public turned on him fast. The comments online were brutal. The man they'd once hailed as a visionary, a genius, a leader, was now being called a fraud, a thief, a liar. His carefully crafted image, the one he'd spent years building, the one that had erased me, it shattered. Like a dropped mirror, splintering into 1,000 sharp, jagged pieces. The board of directors called an emergency meeting. Charles was summoned, grilled, confronted with the irrefutable evidence. The financial records, the discrepancies, the truth. He couldn't deny it anymore. Not with Sarah Jenkins' article circulating. Not with the public clamoring for his head. I wasn't there, of course, but I could picture it. The tense atmosphere in the boardroom. The stern faces of the directors. The fear in Charles's eyes. He tried to explain, to justify, to minimize, but it was no use. The evidence was too strong, too damning. He'd been caught, red-handed, and then he understood. He finally understood. It wasn't the board that had brought him down. It wasn't the media. It wasn't the public outcry. It was me. Walter Green, the quiet retiree, the forgotten founder, the man he'd dismissed, ignored, erased. He realized I'd orchestrated his downfall. I'd planned it, executed it, with a precision and a ruthlessness he'd never imagined. The mask fell. The carefully constructed facade of confidence and control crumbled, revealing the fear, the insecurity, the desperation beneath. He knew that I'd beaten him, not with shouting or threats or legal battles, but with silence, with patience, with the truth. He was exposed, naked, vulnerable, and he knew exactly who was responsible. The game was over. The annual shareholders' meeting, packed, standing room only. Air thick with tension, like a coiled spring ready to snap. I sat near the back, quietly. Didn't need to be front and center. This wasn't my show, not really. It was Charles's, his final performance. He stood at the podium. Looking smaller than usual, shorter, thinner. His suit, usually so crisp, looked rumpled. His face pale, drawn, his eyes darting around the room, nervous, unsure. He didn't have the spotlight anymore. He had the glare. The harsh, unforgiving glare of judgment. He started to speak, his voice weak, trembling. He tried to defend himself, to explain, to justify, but the words, they just hung in the air. Empty, meaningless. The shareholders, they weren't buying it. They'd read the articles, seen the reports, heard the rumors. They knew the truth. A woman stood up, near the front. A shareholder, I recognized her. Mrs. Peterson, the founder's widow. Mr. Miller, she said, her voice clear and strong. We've heard enough, resign. The room erupted, a cacophony of voices, shouting, demanding, condemning. Charles, he just stood there, silent, defeated. The chairman of the board banged his gavel, tried to restore order, but it was no use. The shareholders, they were unrelenting. Resign, they chanted over and over. Resign, resign, resign. Charles, he looked broken. His shoulders slumped, his head bowed. He knew it was over. He mumbled something, a few words. Barely audible. Then he turned and walked away. Off the stage, out of the room, out of the company, in disgrace, stripped of his title, his reputation, his everything. The room quieted, a heavy silence. The silence of judgment, of accountability, of justice. Then the chairman spoke. He cleared his throat. "Before we adjourn," he said, his voice low and reverent, there's one more matter we need to address." He paused, looked around the room. His gaze settled on me. "Walter Green," he said, my name, spoken aloud in that room for the first time in a long time. Would you please stand?" I stood slowly, my legs a little shaky. I felt a spotlight on me. But this time it felt different, warm, welcoming, affirming. The chairman continued. He spoke about my contributions to the company, my early work, my sacrifices, my vision. He spoke about the projects I'd saved, the challenges I'd overcome, the legacy I'd built. He spoke the truth. The shareholders listened, quietly, respectfully. They hadn't known, not the whole story, not my part in it. And then they started to applaud, slowly at first. Then louder and louder, until the room was filled with applause, thunderous applause for me. I stood there, bathing in the warmth, the recognition, the gratitude. It was overwhelming, my legacy, my contribution. My truth. It was finally acknowledged, celebrated, restored. The game was truly over, and I had won. The meeting ended, people started to file out, slowly, quietly, like air leaking from a punctured tire. I could hear the soft shuffle of their shoes on the polished floor, a rhythmic whisper that seemed to amplify the growing silence. The energy, the buzz, the celebratory atmosphere that had permeated the retirement party just an hour before it was gone, vanished as if it had never been, replaced by a heavy, almost oppressive silence that pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe. A knot tightened in my stomach, a cold, hard knot of what? Relief, regret, I couldn't quite name it. I stood there for a moment, frozen in place, my hands still clasped loosely in front of me, just breathing, trying to process it all. The applause, the polite yet somehow strained applause that had followed Charles's final, rambling speech. The recognition, the forced smiles and hollow congratulations from people who, just moments before, had been singing his praises. The vindication, that strange, bittersweet taste in my mouth, the knowledge that I had been right all along, that Charles's carefully constructed facade had finally crumbled. The memory of his face, ashen and drawn, flashed before my eyes. He hadn't even looked at me as he left the room. It felt strange. Not the triumphant rush I'd expected, the surge of adrenaline and satisfaction. More like a quiet sense of completion, a weary acceptance of the finality of it all. Years of suspicion, of careful observation, of piecing together the fragments of truth. It was finally over. The room emptied. The chairs scraped against the floor, each screech a jarring interruption of the silence. A hollow, echoing sound that seemed to bounce off the high ceilings and ornate wood paneling. The chandeliers, which had glittered so brightly just moments before, reflecting the laughter and clinking glasses, now seemed dim, lifeless, their light catching the dust motes swirling in the air, highlighting the emptiness of the room. I could almost feel the weight of the absent crowd, the ghosts of their conversation still lingering in the air. I walked out into the hallway, my footsteps echoing on the marble floor. The silence followed me, a thick, heavy silence that clung to me like a shroud, the silence of revelation, of understanding, of truth, a trut. That had been hidden in plain sight for so long, masked by Charles's charm and carefully crafted lies. I saw a few people huddled together near the elevators, talking in hushed tones, their faces grave, serious. The arrogance, the smugness, the certainty that had characterized the retirement party, the unwavering belief in Charles's infallibility, it was gone, replaced by a stunned awareness of what had happened, of what Charles had done. His embezzlement, his manipulation, the years of deceit, of what I had done. The anonymous tip, the evidence I had painstakingly gathered, the quiet whispers in the right ears. The whispers that had finally brought the whole house of cards crashing down. I walked past them, didn't stop, didn't speak. I could feel their eyes on me, curious, questioning, but I couldn't bring myself to meet their gaze. Just kept walking, one foot in front of the other, a mechanical motion that propelled me forward. I stepped outside. The cool evening air felt fresh, clean, a stark contrast to the stuffy, oppressive atmosphere of the building. The noise of the city, the rumble of traffic, the distant sirens, the chatter of pedestrians seemed distant, muffled, like it was happening in another world. A world I no longer belonged to. I walked home slowly, my mind blank. Empty, I couldn't quite process it all. The events of the evening, the culmination of years of work, swirled around in my head, a chaotic jumble of thoughts and emotions. I opened the front door, stepped inside. The silence of the house, it welcomed me, enfolded me. The familiar scent of old books and polished wood was a comforting balm. It was a different kind of silence now. Not the charged, expectant silence of before, the silence filled with anticipation and dread. Not the heavy, oppressive silence of the meeting, the silence of shared guilt and unspoken accusations, but a peaceful silence, a calming silence, the silence of solitude. I went into my study, sat at my desk. The leather creaked beneath me, a familiar sound, looked around the room. The familiar objects, the overflowing bookshelves, the framed photographs on the wall, the small, intricate clock ticking softly on the mantelpiece. They seemed different now. Sharper, clearer, like I was seeing them for the first time. As if a veil had been lifted, revealing the true nature of things. I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes, just breathed. The tension slowly began to ease from my shoulders. The silence, it filled the room. A deep, profound silence. The silence of truth, of justice, of peace. A peace that had been a long time coming. The game, it was truly over. And the silence spoke volumes. The meeting was over. A week had passed since Charles's resignation. A week of reporters hounding me, wanting to know my side of the story. I'd said nothing. Let the facts speak for themselves. I was back in my routine. Coffee, newspaper, quiet. But the quiet was different now. It wasn't the same emptiness. It was peaceful. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door. Charles, standing there on my porch, he looked different. Older, thinner. His suit, once so sharp, was rumpled. His eyes were red-rimmed. He looked broken. He didn't speak, just stood there, looking at me. I waited. Didn't say anything, just waited. Can I come in?" he finally asked. His voice was low, hoarse. I stepped aside. He walked past me into the living room. He sat down on the sofa without being asked. I sat opposite him in my armchair. We sat in silence for a moment, just looking at each other. I came to apologize," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. I waited. I was wrong," he continued. "About everything." He looked down at his hands. They were trembling. I shouldn't have erased you," he said. You deserve the recognition. You built that company, alongside Mr. Peterson. I was a fool." He looked up at me. His eyes were filled with shame, regret. I understand if you can't forgive me," he said. But I needed to say it. I needed to apologize." I looked at him, the man who had been my protege, the man I had trusted, the man who had betrayed me. I saw the brokenness in him, the humility, the genuine remorse. I accept your apology, Charles," I said, my voice quiet, steady. He looked up at me, surprised, relieved. I know I can't undo what I did," he said. But I want you to know I truly regret it." "I know," I said. We sat in silence for a few more minutes. Then Charles stood up. "Thank you," he said, for seeing me." "You're welcome, Charles," I said. He walked to the door, opened it, turned back to me. I won't forget this," he said. Your generosity, your grace." "Goodbye, Charles," I said. He nodded. Then he was gone. I closed the door, leaned against it for a moment, just breathing. The silence of the house, it felt different now. Lighter, brighter. Like a weight had been lifted. The acknowledgement, it had come. Not in the way I'd expected, but it had come. And it was enough. Weeks later, I sat in my study, the worn leather of my grandfather's armchair creaking softly beneath me. Sunlight streamed through the window, dusting the room with a warm, golden light, a stark contrast to the shadowy gloom that had clung to it for so long. The dust motes, my little ballerinas, danced in the beams, a silent, swirling ballet just for me. It was quiet, peaceful, like it used to be, before everything, before the betrayal, before the lies, before the fight to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The memory of Peterson's smug face, his dismissive wave of the hand when I'd first presented him with my research, flashed before my eyes. The heat of anger, banked but still present, flickered in my chest. I pushed it down, focusing on the stillness of the room. This quiet victory was more potent than any outburst. The documents were still on my desk. The founding papers, crisp and yellowed with age. My annotations, scribbled in the margins in my hurried, cramped hand, a testament to the countless hours I'd poured into this project. The financial records, meticulously organized, each entry a breadcrumb leading back to the truth. All the evidence, spread out, not in a chaotic mess like before when my desperation had fueled a frantic search for validation, but neatly arranged. Orderly like my mind, finally. They weren't just private papers anymore. Copies had been published. Online. The digital ink felt less substantial than the real thing, but its reach was far greater. In the newspapers, thick and weighty, the story printed in stark black and white. My name, Walter Green, printed alongside Mr. Peterson's, finally given its due. My contributions finally acknowledged, publicly, officially, permanently. The vindication resonated deep within me, a quiet hum of satisfaction. I picked up one of the original documents, ran my fingers over the faded ink, the texture rough against my skin. My signature, a testament to my work. My life's work. A lifetime dedicated to this project, overshadowed for so long by Peterson's greed. It felt good, not a triumphant, I told you so kind of good. That wasn't what this was about. It wasn't about gloating. It was about truth, just right, like a puzzle piece finally slotted into its proper place. A sense of completion I hadn't realized I'd been craving. The storm had passed. The chaos, the anger, the thirst for revenge, it had all subsided. It had been a consuming fire, threatening to burn me alive. But now the embers glowed softly, a comforting warmth rather than a destructive blaze. Like a receding tide, leaving behind a sense of calm, a stillness, the quiet lapping of waves against the shore, rather than the roaring crash of the storm. I wasn't consumed by bitterness anymore. Didn't wake up each morning with that gnawing sense of injustice clawing at my gut, twisting my insides. It was gone, replaced by something else. A quiet sense of satisfaction, not the vengeful kind. No, this was different. It was the satisfaction of order restored, balance regained, truth revealed. The scales, tipped so precariously for so long, finally level again. I looked around my study. My books lined up neatly on the shelves, their spines worn and familiar. My photographs capturing moments of a life well lived, a life I had almost let bitterness steal from me. My things. They felt familiar again, comforting. Like old friends welcoming me back after a long absence. The scent of old paper and leather filled the air, a scent I hadn't truly appreciated until now. I took a deep breath. The air was clean, fresh, no longer heavy with the weight of secrets, of lies, of unfinished business. The weight that had pressed down on me for so long, suffocating me, was finally lifted. I closed my eyes for a moment, just breathed in. Out slow, steady, peaceful, the rhythmic rise and fall of my chest, a reassuring constant in a world that had felt so chaotic. It was over, truly over, and I was at peace. Not the fragile, tentative peace of before, the kind that shattered at the slightest provocation, but a deeper, more profound peace, the peace of knowing, of understanding, of acceptance of the past and a quiet hope for the future. I opened my eyes. The sunlight was still streaming through the window, painting the dust motes in a golden hue. The world had kept turning, even when my own world had felt like it was standing still. And I was home. Back in my own skin, back in my own life. I reached out and touched one of the documents. My name, Walter Green. It was there, for everyone to see, printed in ink etched in history, and that was enough, more than enough. It was everything. The coffee was hot. Scalding, really, the kind of heat that kissed the rim of the mug and sent a fragrant plume swirling into the air. Just the way I liked it. One lump of sugar, no more, no less. I stirred it slowly, the tiny clinking of the spoon against ceramic a quiet counterpoint to the rhythmic tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hall. The steam rose, curling in the morning air, carrying with it the rich, dark aroma that had become a comforting ritual. I sat by the window just like always, the worn, floral-patterned cushion molding itself to the shape of my back. The sun, a benevolent presence, was shining through the panes, warming my face. The dust motes danced in the golden light, my little ballerinas, twirling and pirouetting in their silent, ethereal performance. I remembered Charles once commenting on them, calling them cosmic dust bunnies. A small, involuntary smile tugged at my lips. It had been months since the tense, airless meeting room, the hushed whispers, the strained faces. Months since Charles's resignation, his shoulders slumped, his eyes mirroring my own weary reflection. Months since everything. The scandal, the accusations, the sleepless nights spent replaying every decision, every word, every action, searching for the flaw, the misstep that had led to this precipice. The memory still pricked, a dull ache behind my ribs. Things had settled, gone back to normal, or a new normal, a normal that felt both familiar and utterly foreign. Like slipping into a well-worn coat, only to find it subtly altered, the seams shifted, the fabric softer, thinner. I was back in my routine. Coffee in the morning, the familiar weight of the mug in my hand, the comforting warmth seeping into my palms. Newspaper, the crisp rustle of the pages, a soothing sound, the world's events unfolding in black and white before me. Quiet time, the silence no longer punctuated by the insistent ringing of the phone, the demands, the expectations. My retirement, my haven, a haven I had once craved, then resented, and now finally embraced. But it was different, subtly different. The air itself seemed to vibrate with a different energy. The quiet, it wasn't empty anymore. It wasn't the hollow, echoing silence of loneliness or the strained quiet of anticipation. It was full of peace, a real peace, a deep, abiding peace, a peace I hadn't known I was capable of, a peace I hadn't even known existed. It settled over me like a warm blanket, chasing away the lingering chill of the past. My legacy, it was secure, not in the way I had once imagined, with grand pronouncements and public accolades, but secure in the quiet knowledge of my own integrity, my contributions recognized, not by the masses but by those who truly mattered, those whose opinions I valued, whose respect I cherished, my dignity affirmed, not by external validation but by the unwavering voice of my own conscience. I didn't need the applause anymore, the hollow, fleeting rush of adulation, didn't need the accolades, the plaques and trophies gathering dust on a shelf, didn't need the validation, the constant seeking of approval that had driven me for so long, a relentless hunger that could never truly be satisfied. I had the truth, the simple, unvarnished truth, and that was enough, more than enough. I took a sip of coffee. The warmth spread through me, a comforting, familiar warmth that radiated from my stomach to my fingertips. I looked out the window. Mrs. Henderson was tending her roses, her back slightly bent, her gloved hands moving with practiced care amongst the thorny stems. The pink ones, the ones her late husband had planted for their anniversary. They were beautiful, their delicate petals unfurling in the morning sun. I smiled, a quiet smile, a genuine smile, a smile that reached my eyes, crinkling the corners, a warmth spreading through my chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. It was a good day, a peaceful day, a normal day, and that was all I needed, all I wanted. I took another sip of coffee, savoring the taste, the warmth, the quiet moment. Closed my eyes for a moment, just enjoyed the quiet. The peace, the order, the gentle rhythm of the day unfolding, the comforting predictability of my small world. Everything was back in its place, where it belonged, including me. And I was content, truly, deeply content. A feeling I hadn't realized I had been missing for so long. A feeling that filled the quiet spaces, the empty corners of my life with a quiet, enduring joy. The camera lights a little bright, makes me blink. Takes a bit of getting used to. But Martha's grandson, little Timmy, he's got this whole YouTube channel set up. Elder Justice, he calls it. Something about giving a voice to folks like me. Folks who have been overlooked. Forgotten. He asked me to tell my story, said it was important, said it would inspire others. I wasn't sure at first. Never been one for the spotlight, always preferred to stay in the shadows. But Timmy, he's a persuasive young man. And well, maybe he's right. Maybe my story, maybe it can help someone. So here I am, facing the camera, telling my story. The whole story about Charles, about Peterson and Sons, about everything. It's strange. Talking about it all, putting it out there for the world to see. But it feels right, like it's supposed to happen this way. I look at the camera, a small black lens, but it feels powerful, like it can see right through me. See into my soul. It's important, I say, my voice a little shaky at first, then steadier, to recognize contributions, big and small. Everyone has something to offer, something to contribute. Don't let anyone diminish that. Don't let anyone erase you. I pause, take a breath. Truth, integrity, those are important things. They matter more than anything. I look directly at the camera. Sometimes, I say, my voice stronger now, more convicted, silence can be a powerful weapon, but the roar of truth is always louder. I smile, a small smile, a genuine smile. So that's my story. The story of how I reclaimed my legacy, how I got my justice. I look at Timmy, he gives me a thumbs up. And now, I say, turning back to the camera, Timmy here tells me I need to do this call to action thing. I chuckle. So, if you liked my story, if you were inspired, please like and subscribe. And then share your own stories. Stories of underestimated elders getting their righteous revenge. I wink. You know, we're not as forgettable as some people might think. Timmy cuts the camera, the light goes off. I blink. The room feels normal again. Quiet, peaceful. I look at Timmy, he's smiling. That was great, Grandpa, he says. Really great. I smile back. Thanks, Timmy, I say. Thanks for giving me a voice. He hugs me, a tight hug, a good hug. Anytime, Grandpa, he says. Anytime.